So I guess we can start with the Bills a little bit here. So my thing with the Bills, it reminds me last year about the Chiefs and how everyone was talking about the AFC West can be all competitive. The Chiefs lost Tyreek Hill. Maybe the Chargers or the Broncos or the Raiders could be better than the Chiefs this year. But then, I don't know, the Chiefs they won the Super Bowl. The Bills, I think the Chiefs at least lost a big star in Tyreek Hill. Who'd the Bills lose that says like they're going to take such a step back? Now, I'm not saying the Dolphins or Jets can't win the division, but I think the Bills, I don't really think they're going to take a huge step back in terms of being contenders. What's your thoughts on where Buffalo's standing as we head into this year?
I personally think the Bills are still going to win the division this year. The only really notable player they lost was Edmonds, and I really like Trayvon Edmonds. I think he was a great linebacker for them, but I don't think it's going to break the entire defense to lose him. And I think people just want to write them off very quickly because they've been good for too long. It's kind of the same thing with the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs are kind of starting to become a dynasty. And people don't like that. People don't like how good they've become. So I think people just want the Bills to be bad because they've been so good for like the past like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and it kind of runs in with Josh Allen too. Everyone's saying Josh Allen's the most overrated quarterback. No, he's not. He's probably, I mean, I think he's a top 3 quarterback. I think Burrow passed him last year just because he was more consistent, but I still view Josh Allen as a top end talent. I still think he's going to get this receiving core to perform at a very high level. Bringing back same offensive coordinator with Ken Dorsey, Sean McDermott, same coach. And really, they did lose Devin Singletary, who's been there for a while, but we can touch on it. I think their running back room is going to be a lot better this year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think people are really trying to undersell Damian Harris. I know he kind of got replaced with Ramondre Stevenson back in New England, and the injuries kind of slowed him down, which let Stevenson kind of just take over his role. But I still think he's a good power back, especially now that he's going to be in a backup role that's going to conserve him a bit more. And I think I think people are forgetting that James Cook was like a really good running back in college, and we haven't seen too much of him in the league because unfortunately the Bills last year did not really commit to their running backs. And when they did commit, it was very odd usage. They would put one guy in for one play, another guy for the next play. It was very odd. So I think that hopefully Dorsey, he's going to get some, just kind of like go more with the flow of like the running back, just feed the hot hand. And I think the problem is they try to get too cute with it.
Yeah, and I think James Cook is going to have I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar running back, but I think he's going to have a big breakout this year. And unfortunately, a guy I like to watch a lot, Nyheim Hines, he's out for the season now. We found out recently.
Yeah.
And he was their big return specialist last year. They picked him up at the trade deadline. But with him out of the lineup, not only are they losing their third down back option in Hines, but also a really good kick returner. And I think James Cook was already going to be the starter, but now he kind of inherits the kick returner role. He's going to inherit more targets out of the backfield. I wouldn't be shocked if, besides Diggs, if he winds up with the most receptions on this team.
Yeah, no, that's not a crazy concept. It's really unfortunate about Nyheim Hines because that's not even something that was his fault. Like someone hit him, and it's a very messy situation. So hopefully he gets.
Wasn't it someone else's jet ski ran?
Yeah, he was. I believe he was sitting still when someone crashed into him.
Jesus,
which for all we know, that could have disastrous long-term effects because you never know with stuff like that about knee injuries because they're so very very just contentious. But I agree. I think James Cook is definitely in line for an extremely heavy usage role. And I think hopefully he should be able to handle it. I think he's a good running back. I think from some of the flashes we saw from him last year, he could be very good. So I don't blame them for having confidence in him.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about Damian Harris as well. I think the thing about the Patriots, and we're going to get into it in a bit with them as well, their offense was atrocious last year because they didn't have a coaching staff. 2 years ago, Damian Harris was one of the most efficient red zone backs in the league.
Yep.
Now he's going to have the Bills offense setting him up for these just really good targets. I mean, if you play in fantasy football, Damian Harris would be a good, hand to have. I think he's going to get back to being an 8-10 touchdown guy. And then they even signed Latavius Murray, who out of nowhere had one of the best seasons of his career last year on a dwindling Broncos team. He came halfway through the season. He came aboard, had a nice year. So I think as a third running back, even they're pretty set. I mean, that's a consummate pro. So yeah, I think this Bills backfield, it's been kind of their weak point for a while. I think their offense is going to be more well-balanced this year.
I remember during draft time, a lot of people were upset that they drafted Kincaid, the tight end,
Yeah.
instead of like going for like a running back or something. But I don't think that's like super necessary, especially when you have Josh Allen, who I don't agree with the whole sense that he's overrated. I just think people need to be a bit more just like, yeah, sometimes he like lapses into like just like really bad judgment, but I don't think that overall makes him a bad quarterback. It's just that sometimes you'll make him see a questionable throw.
Yeah.
But I think with Josh Allen, especially as a running threat, like this offense, now that there's actually going to be, hopefully, we think they're going to use their running backs more. People are going to be wary of more parts of the Bills offense, which helps them, because a lot of people talk about the fact that like Gabe Davis hasn't like really broken out, but Gabe Davis is the number two. He's doing what he needs to do. He like Stephon Diggs is the number one for a reason, not Gabe Davis.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Stephon Diggs, it's just how the Bills kind of structure it. It's not a, this isn't the Commanders when they have three different receivers they're looking at. Stephon Diggs is getting the ball as long as he's open, or not. Even if he's not open, he's still going to get thrown to because he's that good.
Yeah.
As long as Gabe Davis is stretching the field, making a few big plays. I mean, we saw the one game last year. What do you have, like 200 yards almost on like 3 catches or something? So he has days like that. Some days he's not going to do much. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Khalil Shakir breaks out, but I don't think he's anyone you need to count on. I don't think the Bills need to count on him because between, like we said, Cook, obviously Diggs, elite receiver, and then you mentioned Kincaid, their first round pick, tight end. And then Dawson Knox, I still think is going to play a lot too. I think they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets because everything I've read is like, this is not a demotion for Dawson Knox. The Bills are still very confident in him, his ability as both a pass catcher, a red zone threat, and as a blocker. So I don't think the wide receiver depth behind Diggs is that big a deal.
I agree. I think people are just trying to overblow it. It's like we are talking about. People just want to look for like cracks in the armor when in reality this is kind of just how the Bills, as you mentioned, their offense is just kind of structured this way. And especially like Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, like you were mentioning, last year they tried to do 2 tight end sets with like OJ Howard, but OJ Howard, unfortunately, he wasn't really, lack of a better term, wasn't good enough to be like utilizing the 2 tight end sets like they wanted to. And so they're hoping Kincaid can do that for them. And I think that's going to be huge. Just have 2 huge tight ends out there running routes along with Stephon Diggs and James Cook and also Josh Allen's running ability. I think this offense is going to be pretty great. I don't think it's going to like lose any steam from last year compared to.
Yeah. And I agree. And O-line, it's a little different. They brought Connor McGovern in, but overall, similar lineup, and they're pretty sturdy. They've been pretty sturdy, and hopefully with more pressure on the run game, hopefully they'll continue to block well, even with a potential for more on the ground attempts.
Yeah, for sure. I think as you're saying, like the line was pretty solid last year. They got Deion Dawkins at left tackle. He's a very good player. So I don't think I don't know. I think their offense is still going to be fine. I think their defense is what people should be a little more concerned about. Yeah. But even then, I think like there's definitely like a world where Bills defense stays at least the same level of quality that it were last season.
Yeah, we could talk about the defense because that's the if you're going to make a case, Bills aren't going to win this division. This is where you start. You look at the Dolphins' explosive offense. We'll get to them. We look at the Jets getting Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall coming back. This Bills defense, it has maybe more questions than you would want from a contender, right? Like Leslie Frazier, no longer there. They don't have a defensive coordinator right now. Now, they must be confident. Sean McDermott's a defensive coach. He must be confident in himself and the rest of the guys on this staff to kind of bring it together as a collective effort. But then, I mean, I don't even know where to start. I mean, you start with Von Miller coming off the ACL tear, second of his career, I believe. He's getting up there in age, and he was very good for them last year after signing a big deal. What do you think? What do you expect from him as he's kind of nearing I would say he's nearing the end of his career, but he signed a 5-year deal last offseason. So I'm kind of curious where he goes from here.
Yeah, I don't know. The Von Miller thing is interesting. I think as long as like the injury's not hampering him, I still think he's going to be like the same level of quality he was last year. I think Von Miller, he was just so like he's such like a technically sound player at what he does. I don't think his age is like really a big issue. It's more about just can he stay healthy, which is that's the bigger issue with like regarding his age is him staying healthy. But I think that he should be just fine as long as like his knee isn't bothering him or anything like that. I would just be concerned about what happens if he gets injured again, because they've had a lot of like high draft picks recently that haven't really done anything. AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, those were guys they drafted. I believe both of them second rounders a few years ago. and neither of them has really done anything. And so it's more about what happens if Von Miller goes down, but we don't really know for certain. So as it stands, with him as the starter, and then also they brought in Leonard Floyd, which I don't think enough people talk about because he's pretty good, is like, I still think they're going to be good. I think the only problem is what happens if one of them gets injured.
Yeah, and I think Leonard Floyd has proven that, he had 9 sacks again last year. I think as a secondary edge rusher, when he's playing off someone else, as long as he's not getting doubled, he's going to produce. And I think as long as Von Miller's healthy, Leonard Floyd's going to be an impact guy on this defense. I see no reason that can't happen. I think Greg Rousseau as well, I think, has shown that he has a lot of potential, and they're probably going to look at him for a big third year. So I think the front seven, you mentioned Milano earlier, I think they're going to be pretty solid, especially if Von Miller stays on the field. But, just a concern there with Von Miller. But the secondary, this is where I'm a little concerned. I think talent-wise, even more so than Von Miller's situation, just collectively, the talent, if they all stay healthy, I think they'll be fine. But there's a lot of questions here. And, Tre'Davious White, 2 years ago tore the ACL, took a little bit of time to come back last year. Now it's the year after the injury, right? Or 2 years after the injury. So in most cases, or at least some cases, this is the year he gets back to being an elite corner. But what if he doesn't, or what if he has another injury? Mm-hmm. That's when the secondary is going to start to unravel. Kaiir Elam, their first round pick last year, also had a couple injuries as a rookie. Can he take that next step? And then what do you think about their safety room? So Micah Hyde's coming off a neck injury. He's only played 2 games last year. I remember when we talked about the Bills this time last year, we said they had maybe the best safety duo in the league, but Hyde and Poyer both dealt with injuries last year. They're both in their 30s. And then, obviously the big story everyone's going to be talking about, Damar Hamlin's going to be playing football this year, which is obviously an incredible story. Mm-hmm. But the guy almost died. So what are we going to expect from him? He was a guy he filled in very nicely for Micah Hyde. 90 tackles last year, kind of a breakout season for him at the strong safety, or at free safety rather. But what do we expect from him? I don't think anyone's going to hold it against him if he can't perform to a top-notch level. So a lot of questions. What do you think about that?
Looking at it just from a objective viewpoint, that on paper they should be really good because they have a lot of talented players, but as you're saying, the depth behind them is kind of suspect. If Tre'Davious White doesn't come back from his injury enough, or gets injured again, or Kaiir Elam doesn't take that next step because he's very up and down, their corner room could be a big mess. And it's the same thing with the safeties, as you were mentioning. I think their biggest issue is not necessarily who they have, because Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, I think, are excellent backups for Poyer and Hyde. I think the problem is that, one, Damar Hamlin, as you were saying, he's coming back from a serious heart condition. There's who knows if he's going to be able to really fully go up to speed. And I don't think they really have anyone behind them in case of injuries happens. And I think that's kind of a big issue with them as well.
It's just one of those things where when Jalen Waddle's going over the middle, are they going to be healthy enough, or are they going to be well equipped enough to stop that? And I guess it's a TBD. We have to see if these guys can bounce back. We have to see if these guys, age-wise, they're not held back. But I would say if you're a Bills fan, that's the one thing you got to be concerned about. And then that extends to the playoffs with, Burrow and Mahomes as well. So, yeah, I don't know. Playing in the AFC, if your secondary is your weak point, you're probably not going to make the Super Bowl. But like we said, if everybody gets back on track, then they're going to have a really good secondary like they did a few years ago. So it's a wait and see, but it's definitely a red flag to note.
It's kind of interesting because I feel like this whole things have to play out extremely well kind of applies to the entire AFC East. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing with Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey. Yeah. We have to hope that Howard comes back from injury well, and that Ramsey, continues to play at a high level. Same thing with the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is unfortunately getting older. Who knows what might happen with him and injuries and stuff like that. It's kind of the theme for the whole AFC East. They're all counting on a lot of things to go right.